Hi, we're back. I'm Khan, a crisis counselor for the GAZAP Hope and Healing Program, and I'm here with my partner, Will.
Thanks, Khan. Today we'll be discussing imposter syndrome for individuals at the undergraduate and graduate level.
Yeah, so let's start by defining imposter syndrome. The term imposter syndrome was originally coined by two researchers, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, in a 1978 study with 150 high-achieving women who, despite their high level of professional success, experienced difficulty in internalizing their success. You can think of imposter syndrome as feelings of phoniness or fraud among high-achieving individuals who have difficulty internalizing their success based on their abilities.
Let's break that down even more and talk about some of the signs one can expect from imposter syndrome. People with imposter syndrome tend to minimize positive feedback and maximize negative feedback, while also attributing their success to external factors such as luck. They also tend to self-sabotage by procrastinating and overworking to compensate.
Yeah, and students with imposter syndrome can also fall into a perpetuating cycle of anxiety, where they fear failure, and although they may experience relief when accomplishing a task, the cycle still continues. As you can see here, imposter syndrome can manifest itself as a cycle or pattern of behavior in a person where, because they fear being exposed as a fraud, individuals with imposter syndrome can exhibit workaholic behaviors, and even after they accomplish the task and feel relief, it's only temporary until the next project or task that comes up and the cycle repeats itself.
That's a great point, Colin. As a student, it's not uncommon to feel like you live in that cycle, procrastinating, then overworking, which can often result in burnout. Now let's talk a little bit about the origins of imposter syndrome. As previous research points out, family dynamics can play a role. So these feelings of being an imposter can start from a young age, depending on parenting styles. One way this can happen is when parents have a pattern of giving their child's labels that undermine their confidence in their intellectual abilities, such as referring to them as the social one, the creative one, the funny one, the bad one, or the smart one. If a child is looked at as a savior or the successful one and given indiscriminate praise for their intellectual abilities, this can foster imposter syndrome. This may even occur later in life when families rely on their graduate student.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Will. So there can be this self-fulfilling prophecy based on a label given. If you're the smart one in your family, you may feel additional pressure to achieve, for example.
So now let's talk a little bit more about how imposter syndrome can manifest among college students. Imposter syndrome among college students has been found to predict psychological distress, depression and anxiety, and reduce confidence in their abilities. And it is prevalent across both the undergraduate and graduate levels.
Yeah, and positive correlations in previous research has been found with imposter syndrome and academic success, achievement orientation, perfectionism, evaluation anxiety, and neuroticism.
In addition to that, negative correlations have been found between imposter syndrome and academic efficacy, academic dishonesty, and self-esteem.
Imposter syndrome has been found among groups in the student population, including first-generation students, non-traditional students, and ethnic minority students. So let's start by talking about how imposter syndrome can affect first-generation students specifically.
Yeah, so first generation students, defined as those who are first in the family to go to college, are likely to face disadvantages adapting to the academic environment, including being more likely to come from low income families and struggling academically due to having to work part time or even full time. They also report a greater occurrence of difficulties with time management, cultivating effective study skills, and establishing proper work-life balance.
And those are great points. They are also more likely to experience imposter syndrome than other students.
They may also have family issues with managing issues related to supporting their families at home while also having the added pressure of being the first in their family to attend college and reach graduation.
hmm And first generation students have also reported feeling a diminished sense of belonging compared to continuing generation students. And imposter syndrome has been found in those who are the first in the family to surpass norms.
Stress has been reported as a top health issue that affected the academic performance of students. First generation college students have reported experiencing more stress than their non first gen student peers. In addition, it has been found that first generation students reported less emotional support from their families compared to their continuing generation peers, which may contribute to that increased level of stress they feel.
Okay? So now let's talk about imposter syndrome and graduate students. The transition from undergraduate to graduate school can often bring up feelings on not belonging at this academic level.
Students who did not experience imposter syndrome at an undergraduate level are not always exempt from it at a graduate level.
Yeah, and imposter syndrome can be especially challenging for graduate students who are returning to school after a significant amount of time away from an academic setting. I have personal experiences with this as I had come back to graduate school after a long time of being away from an academic environment and was concerned about my ability to perform at that level. However, as I eased into the term and the assignments, I found that those feelings went away when I found that I could do better.
Thanks for sharing, Khan. Now we're going to talk about how imposter syndrome can disproportionately affect students of color. People of color can experience imposter syndrome not just internally, but also externally due to systemic racism and discriminatory external messages.
Yeah, and academic institutions should work to reduce ways the socio-racial environment negatively affects students of color.
Research shows that understanding and having a strong sense of your racial identity increases resilience and provides positive mental health outcomes. Further, understanding the impact of systemic racism and discrimination on one's identity and competency is beneficial. This way, students of color can be able to better discern external messages related to discrimination and a less welcoming academic environment from actual deficiencies about their abilities. This helps to prevent the internalizing of these harmful messages.
Well said.
There are many ways to cope with imposter syndrome. In a clinical setting, clinicians start with evidence-based treatments for the comorbid conditions, such as co-occurring anxiety or depression.
Yeah, and previous recommendations for treatments of patients included validation of doubts and fears, addressing fears of failure, and group therapy settings to combat feelings of isolation and a sense of alienation that comes with imposter syndrome.
So, some more ways to cope with imposter syndrome. Try discussing your feelings with trusted members of your class. They likely feel the same as you.
Yeah, and you can also discuss your feelings with someone you trust, such as a mentor or an advisor.
And remember that perfectionism is unrealistic. You should be aiming for progress.
hmm And it's especially important to pay attention to your self-talk. Are your thoughts empowering you, or are they disabling you and making you feel like you're not enough?
And make a list of all your strengths and accomplishments. That way you have something to fall back to when you're feeling like an imposter and you can remind yourself that you've done difficult things before.
hmm That's a great point. And It's also important to be honest about what you know and what you don't know, and don't be afraid to reach out for help.
And don't let fear of looking like an imposter hold you back from new experiences and opportunities to grow.
Yeah. And lastly, don't be afraid to reach out for professional help if the stress continues and negatively affects your life.
Well, that's all we have for today's presentation. Thanks for joining us for another part of our video series on transitioning back to campus. Feel free to check out the additional webinars in our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and we have also included in the description links to our Instagram, our website, where you can find our resources and services, such as requesting a brief check-in, and our email address, which you can use to contact us.
The Center for Psychological Services of the Rutgers Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology, in collaboration with the New Jersey Department of Human Services Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services, Disaster and Terrorism Branch, offers this crisis counseling program through a federal emergency management agency grant. This program is brought to you through the New Jersey Hope and Healing Crisis Counseling Program. Thanks for watching.